Evening, and welcome to the series, How the Nature of Man Either Hinders or Aids Being Conformed to the Image of Christ. In this series, we developed an analogy between sin and disease. Sin and iniquity is the disease that all men experience in the body, in the soul, and the spirit due to the fall of man. The symptoms of that disease in the mind are summarized as the lust of the eyes. Now, last time in session 5, we looked at the hindrance to the soul of man, the mind, the intellect, in terms of the hindrance, which is the lust of the eyes. And to recap, we summarize the lust of the eyes as two related but slightly different aspects. One of those is envy. Definition of envy is a painful or resentful awareness of an advantage enjoyed by another together with a desire to possess that same advantage. And the other aspect of lust of the eyes is covetousness. Covetousness has two similar definitions. On the one hand, it is marked by an inordinate desire for wealth or possessions or another's possessions. Or it is an intense selfish desire for wealth and possessions. There are a couple of scriptures that really home in on the lust of the eyes, and they're throughout the Bible. But in particular, Proverbs 27, in reference to envy, says this: Sheol and Abaddon are never satisfied, nor are the eyes of a man ever satisfied. And a scripture that is focused on covetousness, lust of the eyes, we can find in Exodus chapter 20, where the Lord warns us, you shall not covet your neighbor's house, nor your neighbor's wife, nor his male servant, nor his female servant, nor his ox, or his donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. Exodus 20. So, that was last time. These are significant hindrances to a man coming through the mind, the soul of man. So what is the aid? This week we're going to look at, in session 6, the nature of man and the soul still with the mind aspect. And we're looking at the aid or antidote to the lust of the flesh, and that is death to envy and the love of mammon. Okay? The aid, very simply, to overcoming these related lusts is summarized as a fruit of the Spirit, of course, specifically love. 1 Corinthians 4 says this: love is kind and does not envy. Okay? Interesting here what we can gather from this. Did you know that envy in a person is often revealed by their unkind behavior toward those who are the object of their envy? A well-known men's ministry leader some years ago, whom I greatly respect, summarized the truth and the essence of the matter in two simple statements. He said this: lust desires to get because lust desires to get at the expense of others, whereas love desires to give at the expense of self. Let me repeat that. Lust desires to get at the expense of others. Love desires to give at the expense of self. This is the key to overcoming the lust of the eyes. Because if you cultivate the fruit of love, it will cause you to die to envy and the love of mammon. Which brings us to one of the many hard sayings of Jesus that he shared, and you'll find it in Matthew 6, starting verse 24. Two masters. Jesus said this. He says, no one can serve two masters. Either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. Now, Psalm 10, verse 3 and 4 has a very key insight into what Jesus is saying. So hold on to this. Psalm 10, verse 3 says, the wicked brag about their deepest desires. Those greedy people, they hate and curse you, Lord. So let's look at this scripture that Jesus talked about. What you see up on your screen now is a diagram that goes in some detail so that we can look closely and understand better what Jesus is saying and not saying and to whom it applies. Okay? So on the right-hand side of that diagram, you'll see a title, Only One Master. And on the left-hand side of the title, you'll see only one heart condition. So Jesus is saying there's only a pair of heart conditions that can apply to either and both of the masters a man may have. So let's start looking at that. The lower left quadrant labeled 1. This is people who love wealth and they hate God. In other words, wealth is their master, okay? And they love God. That is, they love wealth. In other words, they pursue wealth with all their heart, soul, mind, and strength. And they hate God. That is, they turn aside or ignore or detest God, okay? Moving up to quadrant 2 above 1, the people in this category still have wealth as their master. They have a different heart condition, though. These are people in group 2 who are devoted to wealth and they simply despise God, okay? In other words, wealth controls their thought and actions and words pretty much all the time. And God is simply a low priority or an afterthought to them, okay? Moving right on to the third quadrant, number 3, we now are in the space where God is the master of the people in this arena. And in quadrant 3, we have those that are devoted to God and despise wealth. So let's elaborate. Devoted, that is, God controls their thoughts and actions and words pretty much all the time. And they despise wealth. In other words, wealth is a low priority, kind of an afterthought, if you will. And that brings us to the 4th category in the lower right. These people, again, are those who have God as their master. And their heart condition is they love God and they hate wealth. In other words, they pursue God with all their heart, soul, mind, and strength. And yet with regard to wealth, they turn aside, they ignore, they detest anything to do with mammon and money. Okay. Now, it should be pointed out that both these masters, wealth and God, and both these heart conditions are chosen. They are choices people make. Okay. Again, Jesus says, no one can serve two masters. He will either hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to one and despise the other. Remember that scripture in Psalms 10 we just read? Okay, now let's look a little more deeply at these four categories. What you see coming up on your screen now is the same diagram of the heart condition and master. This time we have looked at all the people in the world, so to speak, and by volume we have looked at and analyzed how people fit into these four categories. So let's go through those. By volume of people in the world. Category 1 on the lower side there, left side, says, these, again, we talked about, are people who have wealth as their master, and they love wealth and they hate God, okay? And that is, they pursue wealth with their heart, soul, mind, and strength, and they turn aside, ignore, or detest God. That's category 1. Who is in that category? Well, unfortunately, as you see in that box 1, most unsaved people fit in this category, but no Christians fit in this category. In fact, it's an oxymoron. You cannot hate God and have a heart of a Christian, period. Okay. So the biggest bulk of volume of people in the world are comprised of category 1. Moving to category 2, there are fewer people in the world. Still, their master is wealth, but their heart condition is that they are devoted to wealth and they despise God. In other words, wealth controls pretty much their thought and actions, mindset, and God is pretty much a low priority or an afterthought, and so forth. So what kind of people fit in this category? Well, as it shows in category 2, some unsaved people fit in this category. The interesting thing is many Christians fit in this category. Okay, moving on to category 3 toward the right. These are people who, remember, have God as their true master. And category 3 is comprised of those people who are devoted to God and they despise wealth. In other words, God pretty much controls their thoughts, actions, and lifestyle. And they despise wealth. In other words, it's a low priority, it's an afterthought, and so forth. The kind of people who fit in this category are fewer than those in category 2 and certainly 1, because there are a few unsaved people that fit in this category 3, and some Christians who fit in this category 3. Okay, moving on to category 4, which, as we see, the circle size volume of people keeps getting smaller. Category 4, again, people who have God as their master. These are the ones with the heart attitude of loving God and hating wealth. That is, loving God, pursuing God with all their heart, soul, mind, and strength, and hating wealth. That is, turning aside, ignoring, detesting wealth. Okay? Who are those who fall into this category? As we see here in category 4, no unsaved people fall into this category. The other interesting, maybe surprising thing is that very few Christians fall into category 4. These are the ones that you can find throughout the gospel Jesus describes as his disciples. If you will be my disciple, if you are truly my disciple. He consistently refers to this very narrow road, which frankly few Christians choose voluntarily. Okay? So, with that thought in mind, again, tying together the hindrance of the mind, which are the lust of the eyes, envy, covetousness, and the 4 kinds of heart condition combinations with masters, let me pose a question or two to you for personal reflection. Where, or let's say what quadrant, do you see yourself in at this time in your life? Think about it. And the question is, why do you say that? Now, another question for your consideration is, if you pray, if you ask the Lord upon your inquiry to the Lord, Lord, where do you see me at this time in my life in these categories, 1, 2, 3, or 4? And more importantly, why? Okay? So, these are deep introspective questions, and not everybody is in a position or has a desire to really find out where they are on some of these issues. But assuming you're one of those that keeps digging and wanting more of God, then I'm going to ask you now to reconsider your rating that you early on gave to this particular aspect of man in the image of God, that is your soul and the mind aspect of your soul, the lust of the eyes. What kind of rating would you now give yourself in terms of the level of hindrance lust of the eyes plays in your walk with Christ? And just for recap, those 5 rating scales are, in this aspect of my image of God, that is my soul, my mind, from my beginning of walk to now, number 1, I see hindrances rule in this aspect of my life. Or number 2, I see evidences of change in this aspect of my life. Or number 3, I have definitely made significant changes in this aspect of my walk with the Lord. Or number 4, I see more of Christ in me now than I do of the old man in this aspect of walking with the Lord. Or number 5, if you dare, I hold myself up like Paul did as an example in this aspect of my walk. Follow me as I follow Christ. Okay? You can do that rating again in your spare time. And let me just recap. If you come up with a 1 or 2 self-rating, it means that you really haven't been very diligent about crucifying, restraining, or disciplining these lusts. The encouragement I have for you is you're self-honest. Thank you. So the exhortation to you is it's time to start relying on the Spirit to develop the fruit of love, which will bring death to envy and love of mammon. Now, if you have a 3 or a 4 rating, that indicates you do have some level of ongoing effort in developing love in your walk. And my admonition to you is keep on keeping on. Okay? Finally, a 5. All I can say about that is give me your secret. Okay? So that's session 6. Now, next time, session 7, we're still going to be looking at the soul, but we're going to shift from the mind to the emotions, and we're going to look at the hindrance in the body to the from the emotions of life. And those emotions, of course, the hindrance of the emotions are the negative emotions like anger and fear and disgust and so on. So next time, session 7, we're going to be shifting over to the emotions and their hindrances. Until then, have a great week. I hope you are meditating and praying on this. God bless you.